Hey, before we get started on things this month, I want to remind you that your support goes very far. For as little as $3 a month, literally the cost of a cup of coffee, you can become a supporter. Supporters are able to watch live shows and hang out to chat with guests afterward. And also, be sure to stay with us to the end of the show where we have an audience question of the month. So without further ado, let's move on to the second half of July's show. Light pollution news, July 2024. We need better resolution. Do we need a new satellite in the sky for monitoring light pollution? What does light at night really mean in terms of economic growth research? And have you ever heard of the constellation Rhea? We finished up our July show with Light Justice's Rhea Osborn, award-winning photographer Josh Dury, and Dark Sky International's own Ken Walczak. And new light pollution news is next. Picking up where we left off, thank you for joining us for the second half of July's episode. To recap, with me today, the lighting designer, writer, and environmental justice advocate working with Light Justice is Rhea Osborn, and the award-winning photographer. You've seen his stuff out on CNN and BBC, Mr. Josh Dury, and then we also have the man who has many important roles, not least of which includes the work he does over at the Adler Planetarium, Chicago. And of course, he's on the board of Dark Sky International, Mr. Ken Walczak. Welcome back, everyone. Let's continue where we left off. Ken, I know you have something to say about this next story. Before we jump in, I came across a BBC Sky at Night article that discussed a recent photo from NASA's Earth Observatory, which is really cool. Peered down the I-95 corridor from Boston to DC. I thought this was great. A very visual representation of how little night we receive here on the East Coast of the United States. With Boston situated on the bottom of the photo, you can see a blank area while traveling southward to New York City, which is made up of several Connecticut state forests. And then we see New Haven, Connecticut, Bridgeport, Connecticut, Stamford, Connecticut, kind of snake their way into Yonkers. And then whereby we'll see the rest of New York City becomes one indistinguishable yellow blur. And from there, you pass through North Jersey to Philadelphia, where you can barely make out the Delaware River. Passing Philly, you see Wilmington's lights before the dark spot, which is northern Chesapeake. And eventually you make it all the way down to D.C., which I'm assuming Baltimore and D.C. are kind of merged in there. I couldn't really tell anything apart. Thought this was a really nice way to illustrate what you're going to discuss, Ken. You're one of the researchers who helped write the review article in Nature this month, Monitoring Trends and Impacts of Light Pollution. The report appears to act as a concise summary of measurement deficiencies and impacts of light pollution. I hope I got that right, Ken, when I read it. So why don't you tell us what drove the impetus of this article? Why is it important?
Yeah, the impetus was actually, there's a number of us light pollution researchers who were, over the last few years, been involved in pitching or actually proposing a satellite mission to be dedicated to observing light at night across the globe. You might be familiar with that, the black marble image of the Earth at night that's collected from a satellite that NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, manages.
And Ken, isn't that used for a lot of research, the black marble?
Yes, and that's the thing. It's a wonderful instrument, but there's a few serious limitations. First of all, it does global maps every night, so we can actually look at things changing season by season. But there's two or three main problems with it. Is that it does not see blue light. And as anybody who knows anything about light at night, blue is very important, and it's also becoming more dominant since the advent of LEDs. Since it doesn't see that, we don't really get a true picture of what's changing. The other thing is its resolution is somewhere near about 500 meters per pixel. I mean, 500 meters per pixel is like an entire city block. So you can't really distinguish much more than a big blob over here and a big blob over there. I mean, it's great for a global scale, but we need better resolution if you're going to talk about how it affects migration of insects or birds or things like that, And the other aspect is that only images at about 1:30 in the morning. It's overpass time, which, as we've been talking about, like all these cities that might, especially in Europe, that might be dimming lights. Are you really seeing that late at night what the true picture is. So there's some limitations to the information we have for light pollution research. So our last mission proposal to the European Space Agency, unfortunately, a couple of months ago, we found out did not pass the final rung. So we're going to try it again. But we realized in that process that it's like, you know what? We need to build some more consensus. It's all about outreach. It's all about awareness. And this article specifically is saying, here's all the really important questions ecologically, environmentally, health, why, and also when it comes to social justice, when it comes to like one of the focuses is on the stability of nighttime lights in developing areas. If you don't have access to the light at night in, sub-Saharan Africa, for example, you're missing out on a certain economic and social benefit. So we can actually monitor those kind of things. So we wrote this paper to encourage more researchers to see how vital it is to understand the half the globe at night, So that was sort of like the idea behind it. And so we tried to pull together all the details that would maybe get a entomologist and a social scientist and everyone else really more on board with this idea. So next time we do our proposal, hopefully we'll have much more consensus on it.
What's been the feedback on it? Have you seen a lot of people who otherwise might not have known about it or might not have heard about any of the issues you're talking about in there?
From my experience, I mean, this is just my experience. I've presented at a number of conferences, like the other year, presented at the AGU, the American Geophysical Union conference, which is like literally 10,000 or more scientists come together to, in this conference. It's huge. And the amount that light pollution is mentioned is so small. And I'm seeing a growth. I'm seeing more people be aware of it, more people in the research side saying, wow, this is something we hadn't considered before. And so that is encouraging. And that's just, light pollution news didn't exist 10 years ago. And there's a reason why it exists now is because I think it's becoming something that people want to hear. And so just like the research community, same thing.
Yeah. Like I told Betty Maya, there's enough. Like we have enough news you can do a podcast on. So it's a huge avenue of articles that come through. We had 101 this month that I tracked. So yeah, I think that's great. And yeah, go ahead, Ken.
I just want to throw in one thing since you're referencing that photograph of the East Coast from the ISS, International Space Station. If anybody's interested, there's a thing called the Gateway to Astronaut Photography of Earth. And I'll make sure to share the link. Literally every single photograph of the Earth from space that has anything to do with NASA, I mean, literally all the way back from the Gemini program and Mercury program, all the way to today, is searchable and findable through that gateway. And what's really cool is you can actually search a geographic area. So I want to see, what's around, Chicago. I can draw a little box around Chicago, and then you can even search for just nighttime images. And then they'll give you everything from that's ever been shot, that's been cataloged at least, and you can start to do more than just that one image. You can actually get amazing images, and it's actually really helpful in research as well.
That's a great tip. What was the site again?
It's called the Gateway. I'll put a link, Gateway to the Astronaut Photography of Earth, and I'll share the link with you, and anyone can search and use those images. Last
time you were on, you're using balloons, kind of like the Chinese weather balloons to see the lights, to track the lights in Indianapolis. Well, actually, it was just out there for the race, but I didn't stay at night. Are you still using the balloons to identify different light sources and track lighting trends and radiance?
Yeah, we map like a single flight will generate about 50 to 60,000 images, and then they have to be geo-referenced, but we can actually map an entire region. So like when we just did a flight in February over Indianapolis, another one because we wanted to look for actually tree phenology, tree health research, because we wanted, and also urban wildlife research. So we've done a number of flights in the spring and summer where there's a lot of tree cover. Now, if we can, so we did a flight in February that we can compare how much does the light at night shine up when there's not tree cover. So that's why we deliberately froze ourselves to do a flight in February, and it is worth it. So yeah, we're still continuing that research.
Very cool. Well, glad to hear. In the same vein as your article, Ken, past guest and immortal John Barentine, his team put together a State of Science report, which I have linked in this episode page. And Barentine and the team do a great job providing an exceedingly concise view of where science is on this topic. And by exceedingly concise, I believe it was like 14 pages long or thereabout, in very readable English. Between both these articles, between your article, Ken, and John's State of Science report, you really, anyone who's kind of new to the topic can really, really get up to speed in no time, because they both really are easy to read and they detail pretty much a great summation of where we're at. So I really hope everyone's taking a look at the State of Science report. I think it's like a third of it, I think, is citations, which is great because then you can chase down things. Leah, do you ever hear people reference that? Do people look at the State of Science report?
Yeah, I mean, I might be the wrong person to ask to get a sort of representative opinion here, because I really appreciate the work that Dark Sky does to, bringing together information that's easy to access. No, I have read the State of the Science and just appreciate the effort that's gone into providing that level of detail and access to research. I would say, it's, to be totally frank, I'm very hopeful for kind of more bridges across the lighting design community and, the advocacy community around light pollution, because I think we maybe I've heard anyway, I'm not part of the old guard in the lighting industry, but I've heard that, things kind of got off maybe on the wrong foot initially, the sort of sense that, people who are advocates against light pollution just don't want any light. And, the lighting manufacturing, sector is like, you must have more light. And in fact, I think now we're seeing so much cooperation and really aligned hopes and incentives and intentions, between the advocacy community and the lighting community. For instance, like on Roland, that was an effort between both, the IES and the ILD, and a number of other lighting organizations and Dark Sky. So there's a lot more cooperation between them, and I'm hoping that, State of the Science is widely read in the lighting design community. I also hope that, some of the resources that we have can be more widely shared with, the Dark Sky community and those who are advocates against light pollution, because, there's a lot of really helpful information from a technical perspective, which, as you said, can sort of add to the lexicon, add to the toolkit for advocacy, including, I'll just mention here, and I'll also make sure that you get a link, but the IES has a lighting ready reference app, which is available not only in English, but I think French and Spanish as well. But, it has some core lighting information and knowledge, little calculators, a lot of general knowledge information that for a long time was only available to lighting professionals, if you remember, but they've made an effort to make that more available. So I'd say in addition to State of the Science, some of these other resources would be a great kind of augmentation for somebody who's looking to, quickly get a sense of what's going on and how to take action.
That would be, because a lot of the IES stuff is kind of behind a closed gate, right? Like it's a pay gate there, a paywall that makes it really difficult for folks to actually be able to access.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. And that's something that the Light Justice team, we've been trying to identify, where we're getting a lot of interest, and really just like folks really wanting access to more information. We're doing what we can to then communicate that back to these organizations and say like, hey, people would really benefit from this. Maybe it's behind the paywall, but could we offer a discount, for citizens rather than professionals? And so far there's been a lot of positive response to that. So we'll keep doing what we can and, see what we can do to make these resources more accessible.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would benefit. I know for myself, a handful right off the bat would benefit quite well from that. So that's great to hear. I want to jump quickly to this article. There's an article where a team actually, for the first time, gauged the amount of light that was emitted from a public performance, and that was out in Lollapalooza in Berlin in 2016. This, I definitely get it. Like, you need to have artistic, modern performance accompanying light shows. Like, that's part of the experience when you go to shows and you see musical acts. That's part of it, to see how the visual stage presents itself. That's not counting any kind of pedestrian or parking lights, but the actual light increase output was about 8%. And the study looked at how the music festival impacted at night. So that was very interesting. Okay, so before we leave this area, I just want to bring up one last article out of China that appeared in Journal Land. So last month we had a podcast that came through that had actually talked about how there was money to be had in, say, astrotourism in dark skies. And I just want to bring this in here because, Ken, you hinted at it. We still look at variables, including, say, nighttime light as a growth variable for the economy. Does dark sky do anything to kind of quantify or track astrotourism dollars?
I don't know of anything offhand for Dark Sky International, but I know there's a report that was done a few years ago. I might have heard about the economic benefit of astrotourism on the Colorado Plateau, which is, everything from Colorado, Nevada, Utah, all that. And, they found literally, they estimated, don't quote me on this, but it was, I think, about $5.3 billion over a decade of economic, in a sense, benefit from astrotourism. Now, so that's the one side of it. If you have very pristine areas, and I know some folks who work in everything from Nepal to, other Kazakhstan and other areas that, maybe don't have a lot of, especially rural areas, don't have a lot of economic, opportunities. And yet the thing they do have is a resource that is disappearing from the world. And so, you think about, on the one sense, you don't want to deprive people of, technology and the modern world in a sense. But on the other side, it's like, you want them to be able to value what they have and maybe even benefit from it. So in that case, until Bill gets back, you guys have any thoughts?
I guess I would say that, it seems like, as with many other areas, light is just one factor among many, right? When you're considering investment in an area and, the attempt to bring economic benefit to an area where there's need. And so, I think I've done a lot of work with a lighting design firm that's based in Shanghai and Taipei and Shenzhen. And, coming straight out of grad school, I did see a lot of lighting projects in more rural areas of China, and they often coincided with this larger push to kind of revitalize certain regions. And so lighting was just one element. And I think, again, because of the nature of it and the way that the technology is advanced, it can sometimes be, I think, utilized as like not a quick fix, but, a very visible marker of investment, right? And so I think that's where it gets tricky, sort of investment. I think in this case, looking at investment in the community, not detracting from its access to the night sky, and maybe even considering access to the night sky a resource and a value, right, that can be called out and offered.
I'm curious. Mind if I ask you a question, Leah? Sure. So one of the things I've always had conversations about and also thought about a lot is, so you have developing areas, developing nations, developing economies, and you could say, well, don't do what we did. Don't use light as a weapon, almost, just saying, like, blast our environment with light, learn from our mistakes. But it kind of has almost a kind of a colonial feel to it, where it's like, oh, well, you were able to light your environments to be able to benefit from the growth in your economy, and why can't we? But it's like, I don't know, it's a difficult and fragile kind of a conversation to have. And I was curious if you had any ideas about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much complexity there, right? It's, I think, as with any aspect of, where is the first world right now, right? And what sort of benchmarks have we established, in first world countries that now seem to be worth attaining or, worth reaching for, because they're going to bring a certain amount of stability or quality of life or economic standing, or whatever that is. It's true. There are a lot of these benchmarks that have been, I think, inadvertently set. And so it is, I think, a little too facile, a little bit too easy to say, okay, learn from our mistakes. Here's where we've learned better. Now here's where we should be instead. circumvent all of that and meet us here, that's oversimplifying, right? The access to resources, whatever immensely complicated set of things that allows for that journey to get there. So I am, alas, not somebody with all the answers here, but I agree. I think there is, I think, more need, therefore, for us to be offering resources and participating in dialogue in these places, right? Offering what we can, connecting across organizations and resources. I think it's just, let's show up and let's participate, right? Rather than saying, hey, this is your problem, good luck.
Moving on to an interesting story, Ken, I think you're probably aware of this one. It comes from actually Megan Eves. He wrote the BBC article that I based it on. So it's a very interesting story. And we're talking about essentially indigenous ties to the night sky. And recently, or in the past few episodes we had, Travis Nowitzki has a phenomenal book. I highly recommend it. Anyone who's interested in checking out the Lakota people's history or the Lakota people's heritage of the night sky, especially Aurora Borealis, and how the lore around that. And it's a phenomenal picture book too, because the guy's an amazing photographer. So I recommend that Spears Dancing. But this one is going to talk about, this article here is talking about a community pinched between Paraguay, Uruguay, and Brazil in the brilliant Misiones province of Argentina. Given the province's location in Paraguay is heavily influenced by Native American traditions of the Guarani people, the community there has been working conservation from all angles, including building protections for their night sky heritage. The project, titled Celio Guarani, which is Guarani Sky, has come about in part due to the hard work of dark sky advocate named Alejandro Sommer, and the community hopes to obtain a dark sky reserve, creating what they claim will be the only global place to legally protect the sky, soil, and waters. I just want to pause on that for a second and say, wow, that's a incredible just statement right there. Traditionally, the Tapake Milky Way, as they would call it, is translated into the old road of the Guarani, which carries with it a not so unfamiliar tale, whereby the Tapake serves as a path to and for the afterlife. And to explore that a little more, as a hobby, I stargazed, and I was telling Chris and Shane over at the Actual Astronomy podcast, Shane, who's been on here before, that I've been working my way through an asterisms list, whereby you can attempt to find a large list of asterisms in the night sky. And I came across this one from the Guarani. So, because it's just, to me, it's very intriguing. It's called The Story of the Rhea Constellation. And the Rhea are birds that are kind of distant relatives to African ostriches, native to South America. And contained within the boundaries of this constellation are 9 Greek European constellations, with the posterior area covered by the constellation Scorpius. So for my guests here, I'm going to play this little video recording, and I highly recommend you at home just take a look at the video real fast. I'm going to actually push it through a little bit in here since we're running a little late on time, but you can find the link over at lightpollutionnews.com. Side note, and how about this? The Guarani actually have a god that's protective of the yerba mate plant and siestas. In and of itself, that's pretty amazing. That's a very, very big combination right there. Let me see if I can pull this up real fast here and see if I can share this to you guys. And again, I highly recommend you at home just take a look at this video.
Is there sound? Is not getting sound?
Yeah, there should be sound coming through.
Sorry.
So what we're seeing here is we're seeing the outline of the Rhea, and it's actually going from star by star. And this is a like an artistic AI illustrator type image you'll see. Within that outline, you see the 9 different constellations that most astronomers would know, like Scorpius or other. Then you have a slew of southern constellations. And it's going to tell the tale of how the Rhea tried to devour 2 eggs that are near its peak, which are Beta Muscae and Alpha Muscae, which are two part of the stars. Then Beta Centauri and Alpha Centauri are the eggs that the actual bird has swallowed. The Guarani myth tells that the Southern Cross that holds the Rhea's head to prevent it from drinking all of the water in the world. And if it gets loose, we will die of drought and thirst. Very, very cool piece. I love asterisms, and I love the stories and the meaning that we put in kind of like just inanimate things like stars. It just blows my mind.
I always like to say that the sky is before there were books, there's always the sky. And, everybody shared that book, and like, I'd never seen this, sky legend before. And it's like, I think it's amazing because pretty much takes half the sky is like, we're so used to breaking them up into smaller constellations, and each one has a little story. And it's like, this is saying, it's just a whole different way of approaching the sky, which, I always appreciate. I mean, how different cultures see the world and the sky in different ways. And if I mentioned this before, that I work with kids, mainly high school students in Chicago, and for most of them, they don't even look up because there's really nothing to see in a Chicago sky. They don't even realize there's stars above their heads. And, and if you just lost that book, then, we're also lost that knowledge. So, I'm glad they're working hard to protect that area.
And all that anthropology in there, the tales of whole cultures. Yeah, it's great. There's another story here. The Luciano people out in the San Diego area, which are the original inhabitants of the West Coast of San Diego through Los Angeles, they have a tale that the coyote actually scattered all of the glowing embers into the sky, creating the stars that illuminate our night. And it anchors itself on Earth, where there's a rock, the Wanu rock, which contains a white quartzite streak that binds the Earth to the sky via the thicket of the Milky Way. Just find that to be pretty great stuff. That came about because the community, the actual tribal lands around Fallbrook, California, are supporting their attempt to become a dark sky community. So interesting things out there. Really, really neat tales. Josh, I didn't know if you're trying to...
Yeah, there was one comment I was going to make, especially in relation to the major lunar standstills taking place right now. So a lot of heavy research is going on in relation to ancient sites. But what I was going to mention there in relation to dark sky culture and heritage is, in the instance of Stonehenge, the amount of light pollution from somewhere so iconic yet so vast. And yet you have one of the UK's leading military bases, Lark Hill, as a part of the MOD right next to Stonehenge. So, like, you guys probably have seen the images, but you'll see, like, Stonehenge and Comet Neowise above, only to find that, these images are, being affected by light pollution. So already in a contextual narrative for these images, it really puts into perspective, that our ancients 4,500 years ago were watching these things. And then to suddenly have that taken away from us, it really brings that cultural aspect into the picture, as well as, Starlink constellations when they pass over such a megalithic structure like Stonehenge. So, yeah, very thought-provoking.
Yeah, and there's stuff going on in Stonehenge right now, right?
So every 18.6 years, the moon's reaching the most extreme positions of its cycle. So whether it's the most easterly, or I should say most northerly or most southerly, moon rises and moon sets. But because they occur every 18.6 years, we've got this window of opportunity now until 2025 to be observing these phenomenon. So even then, like with Stonehenge, like, we see the changes to landscape. So whether it's trees have grown, they're delaying the moon rises. It's all of these things which are being picked up now with astrophotography and with the study of archaeoastronomy. So that's quite interesting in itself, just as a purely astronomical subject, but light pollution comes into it as well. So yeah, really, a mixture, really, I would say.
Well, let's go to quick health news, and then I want to give you guys a chance to plug yourselves. On the health front, 2 recent studies, one in Science and one in Cell Stem Cell, point to why the alignment of circadian clocks is so important. The source of alignment appears to derive from what researchers deem the central circadian clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus area of the brain that is triggered by photoreceptors in your vision system. And listeners are already aware of that your eyes kind of trigger something, right? So that centralized clock directs a second peripheral body clock that manages cellular level body processes. It falls out of alignment when the body's centralized clock is miscued due to something like jet lag or other non-standard day-night issues such as irregular shift work. Researchers in these studies believe that the alignment of two clocks will slow the pace of degeneration of bodily functions that occur with aging. Interesting stuff there. There were other articles in Health that I came across that I didn't really necessarily want to discuss because I wasn't too sure on the foundation of them, but this one here talks just about the circadian rhythm and what goes on in there, which I found really interesting. So we're close to wrapping this thing up, and I have some, I think they're really fun articles. Maybe you guys disagree, but I think they're really fun articles coming up. We'll finish up the July show in a second. But before we get to that, I want to remind you at home, subscribe to Light Pollution News if you haven't already. You can just hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening. And you can also visit us over at lightpollutionnews.com. You can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And if you're curious about any of the articles in today's show or the earlier show in the month, simply head over to lightpollutionnews.com and take a look at the show notes. If you want to see that video to Rhea constellation, I highly recommend it. Go to lightpollutionnews.com and take a look. See all the links are at the top of the show's page. So every article's in there. Finally, you can reach out to me, Bill, in two easy ways, simply by using a free text link on today's show description via the podcast player, or you can simply email me at bill@lightpollutionnews.com. And before we start wrapping up with our feel-good stories of the month, I want to give you, my guests, a chance to plug yourselves. You guys are doing awesome things, and I want people to hear about them. So, Rhea, where can folks learn more about the work you're doing, Light Justice, any of the activities you're part of?
Yeah, thanks again for this opportunity. It's just great to have chatted with you all, and really hope that our listeners are gonna be excited to look through all the amazing resources that you're sharing in these articles. Light Justice, we've got a website up. It's lightjustice.org, and we do have resources available there for folks who are interested in learning more, are interested in projects that consider light justice. We also are hoping to soon make available recordings of 2 light justice symposiums that we have co-hosted with the IES, looking at both outdoor and indoor lighting and its impact on humanity and our planet. So go to lightjustice.org for more information. And, we're also excited, myself especially, to lead folks to the work of, others in the field, like going back to the mythology around the night sky. Dr. Aparna Venkatesan has done some really wonderful research that I'm hoping to add to our list of resources. Lisa Heschong, when we're talking about, human visual development, has done some wonderful work there. So we'll be making all of that information available on the resources page there. Excellent.
Thank you for that plug. Hopefully listeners definitely check that out. And Rhea, you talked about the mythology part. When I'm doing the astroisms list, I picked up these ridiculously large binoculars, like they're 20 pounds. And I got a huge mount that you would use for production, probably for production video, to hold these. And I think one of the most overlooked, easiest, and coolest things to do in the night sky is to look either for asterisms, which are just things that people saw, or be able to skim across and see if you see anything that you find really intriguing, just in the shape and the formations of the stars. It's so cool. And you'll come across, I remember the other night I forget which constellation, but I came across a little tiny W, just a little tiny concise W, just randomly. I wasn't expecting that. And it's just one of those things where your brain automatically turns it into something, and I don't know. It's like some boyhood excitement there. I don't know why it's so exciting to see these little objects up there.
That's so beautiful. I mean, I think that gets to the heart of why it's critical for us to protect this shared resource, right? As Ken said, this is a book that we all share, that we share with our ancestors and our ancestors' ancestors, to the earliest. We share this book with all all creatures, right? And so,
Leah, here in the U.S., it played a role. It wasn't just something that, we look at for stories, but it played a role in the Underground Railroad. It played a role in people's lives. It wasn't just, some heritage or, somewhat religious aspect, but it actually directed people and showed people how to get to freedom.
Yeah, no. And that makes me think too of, in Polynesian traditions, so much of mapping and direction finding was from learning the night sky. Actually, I meant to mention earlier, but, again, growing up, spending so much time with my grandparents in Taiwan, I wonder if next time you look up at the night sky, you might also add this to it. So in Chinese history, kind of in the relationship with the night sky, the sky is actually where all the gods live, right? And so it's actually divided into 28 mansions, like look at it architecturally, but there are stories, right, in each one, and you can look up and be like, oh, what are they up to tonight? One of my favorite festivals is actually the Moon Festival in Chinese tradition. And I love that there are festivals specifically about, the sky and what's happening there, kind of connecting us to it.
Yeah. Very cool.
I love that you are also writing your own sky lore.
Right. Yeah. So cool. All right, Josh, where can people find your photos? Tell us, how do we connect visually with not just the environment, but the night?
Yeah, sure thing, Bill. Well, thank you very much for having me on today's show. If anyone would like to see any examples of my astrophotography, you can go over to my website, which is www.joshduryphotomedia.com. So from there, you can see the sorts of astrophotography I do, as well as advocacy work. And so there's a whole mixture to see there.
Ken, where can people learn more about everything that you do, sir?
Well,
or maybe just one thing, whatever you want to give us.
Yeah, I would always point people to darksky.org, but also if you want to learn about what we're doing here in the Chicago area, you can go to darkskychicago.org. So that's our local chapter. And, we're trying to learn from other folks as well as teach by example. I mean, when we have a success, we like to put a story up on our website, and maybe that can help someone else go, oh, that's how you did that. We're, like I said, and we're also trying to learn from other chapters as well. Like, how can we move this all forward to the best 2045 we can have?
Yeah, that'll be great. I'm looking forward to that great 2045. So let's make it happen. Let's make it a real thing. Okay, so let's get to some fun pieces. We honestly don't get enough of these, and I'm really excited to have them here. Cosmic baseball. Have you guys ever heard of cosmic bowling? I think this is big back in the 90s. Showing my age here. Essentially, it's you're bowling in black light, right? So Colonial Heights, Virginia, the Tri-City Chili Peppers made history on June 1st as the first baseball game to be played under black light. Exclusively under black light. Given the success of the game, they look to repeat this later in the season. So there's a little backstory here. The team employed lighting professionals and a budget to the tune of $100,000 to create the event, although the actual price far exceeded that budget. The team used 18 500-watt black lights to provide a uniform, shadow-free black lighting experience. I can't speak to how healthy it is to bathe players and fans in black light for a couple hours, but everyone who participated appeared to enjoy it. It seemed to be a big hit. And unfortunately, the event was not without its challenges. Batters complained about not being able to pick up the ball spin, and fielders in the outfield had a difficult time trying to engage pop flies. But beyond that, perhaps it's a new avenue for nighttime baseball lighting. Ken, I don't know if you're a baseball fan, but I feel like the Red Sox, they're a franchise that are in trouble, right? Maybe they can go with black light for the next few games.
Maybe just do it in the dark. A little in the dark fall. I don't know. Stadium lights are notorious for giving off a lot of light. Yeah.
I'll say this for stadium lights, because everyone, I don't know when last time any of you guys have gone to a sporting event, every stadium has a massive amount of LED screens now, right? Everything's an LED screen. Every single, where you look is a full throttle LED experience. Down at Citizens Bank Park for the Phillies, it actually dimmed when the sun went down. So considering you have no less than, 30 LED boards looking at you, it actually it was nice. It wasn't dark by any means, but you didn't have the daytime brightness to them, which actually made a difference. Next time you guys head out to Auckland, maybe you can pick up some collectible coins. New Zealand Postal Service, the NZ Post, released a coin set that commemorates The, Ken, help me here. The Wairarapa, I don't know. I'm not going to.
I'm the same way. Wairarapa, I think is, what is it?
The Wairarapa Dark Sky Reserve. One side of the coin has a 45-degree angle of the Milky Way going across, and the southern lights are placed on the other side in an orange-red glow from the surface. Now, while the coins are technically $1, the set retails for about 425 New Zealand, 261 USD. Despite the price, they sure do look nice. Only 500 per minute, and it's designed by Helen Perkins. Cool things, cool little collectibles. What a way to commemorate, something interesting happening in your country with a dark sky coin. And do you love natural light? Well, natural light, of course you do. Do you love natural night? Now we're talking. And you live in Nevada? Well, why not show it with the Save Starry Skies license plate? I know this has been out there for just a little bit, but it came into production about a month ago, and it debuted back in May initially. The actual license plate features a family peering at the star-rich sky with a Big Dipper asterism right above them. Portions of the proceeds go to Nevada Wilderness to help protect of the many things Nevada is natural night. What a strange place. Nevada, the place of the sphere, also has a Save Starry Skies license plate. Hey, keep on fighting, guys. Love it. New designations this month, we include the Kauara Gippsland Dark Sky Reserve in Queenstown, New Zealand, which is the 7th location in New Zealand to have a dark sky designation. Moab is a dark sky community officially. Chickalinga, Australia is the first dark sky community down there. Let's finish up with this little piece here. So there's an article in The Guardian from a lady, Annabelle Abbs, and she is the author of a book called Sleepless. She wrote this piece that, and I have a hypothesis about our incessant fear of the night. And while it's probably a good thing to have an underlying fear of the dark, the same way, say, to have an underlying fear of heights, the less we encounter dark, the more we are unprepared to handle it. Where our fear becomes less about the rationality and more about the crippling immobilization, right? I used to have fear of heights. I still do to a point, but years of climbing have kind of conditioned me to manage that fear, understand my risks, ascertain a mental capacity to actually control that fear. Well, Abbs appears to, in very much the same way, have flexed that muscle to manage and control any fear of dark that she may have. It speaks to a variety of positive nighttime experiences, including night swimming and hiking and a newfound appreciation of the uniqueness of unlit night. But her most important thesis actually derives from this quote. And I love this. We have a lot of good quotes today. Here's a good one. When we welcome darkness, we give nocturnal life a better chance of survival. Stars and meteors are clear. Moreover, we keep our night vision working. We sleep better and enjoy improved mental health. And we encounter our rewired selves and discover all its transcendent and adventurous guises. I think that truly sums up the mission of dark sky advocates and defenders of natural night. I hope everyone here in the Northern Hemisphere has a great start to their summer. Conversely, as the southern constellations of Rhea and Matariki rise in the Southern Hemisphere, have a nice seasonal start to the winter or New Zealand New Year. I want to thank you at home for staying with us today. And a big thanks to our supporter and live stream guest today, Steve Mariconda. Thank you for hanging out with us. Great to see a nice audience member down there. And I want to thank today's guest. Couldn't have asked for a better panel. Rhea Osborn, Josh Dury, Ken Walczak. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thanks for inviting me again. Yeah.
Anytime you guys want to come back, just let me know.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Bill.
Well, thank you guys.
I think, you got to have more lighting designers on. I think that, they're the ones where they have a lot to say about this, and we need to talk to. So, Rhea, thank you so much for also being on.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a shared passion of ours, right? So I could talk anybody's ear off about this, and also just so happy to partner with advocates. We should be working together more closely.
Yeah, I'd love to have more lighting designers on. So open call out there. If you're a lighting designer, feel free to reach out. Bill at lightpollutionnews.com. Anyone who supports the show will have access to a link for future live recordings too. So if you're a supporter out there, like Steve, and you can check the show. You'll be able to have a show link out there for supporting the show and actually come here and watch the live version of the show and watch me stutter and walk around in verbal circles for about an hour or two. As a reminder, Light Pollution News is recorded towards the end of the month. Given the upcoming Independence Day holiday here in the U.S., we recorded on the 23rd of June. And this month we split the shows. Give this a try for a bit. See how it goes. You listener, let me know how you feel about it. Hopefully it works for you. You can find all the details of this show, lightpollutionnews.com. If you have any other thoughts or questions, just want to say hi, feel free to text us via the show notes. There's a text line in there, or drop us a line at bill@lightpollutionnews.com. Thank you again. I'm your host, Bill McGeeney. Always remember, only shine the light where it's needed. Thank you. What a great time this month. What a great time this month. We even weathered a thunderstorm midway through. This month, I'm curious to hear what constellation stories that you would love to share. You have a constellation story that you really it connects with you in some way, shape, or form. Why don't you share that story via text, Light Pollution News link in the show notes, and I will read these on air at the beginning of next month's show.